Okay, I think most people are on, but probably have a few more that would join, but we'll go ahead and get started. So thank you all for being flexible with us today with our technical difficulties, but we're back and back with Candace and Live Out Live. Thank you, Candace, again for just all of the amazing curation you've been doing with industry sessions. So we're excited to continue to hear from the people that you are bringing in. And LaDonna, I know we already talked a little bit, but excited for you to join today's class. And I'll turn it over to Candace for the official intro.
Thanks so much, Skylar. Hey guys, good to see everyone again. Thank you so much for having us. As Skylar mentioned, I'm Candace, the CEO and founder of Live Out Live. And I'm just excited to be able to bring some of my colleagues and peers that I respect and have high regard for in the music industry to the forefront and share them with you guys and allow them to share some insights and tips to kind of help elevate what you guys are already learning in your industry sessions in your course today. So today we have LaDonna Williams, and I'm going to allow her to introduce herself. But LaDonna, thank you so much for being here. We're so excited to connect. And today is going to be more of a conversation with you and I are going to kind of just have a easygoing conversation as friends and peers in this industry and talk about the music business, right? Something that we both are versed in, but you have a lot of skill set and talents that I know of that I'm not familiar with as far as how to execute, and I have a few of my own, right? So it's going to be cool for us, and then we share a lot of the same in business acumen. So I think that it's going to be cool for us to kind of like dive in and learn a little bit more from each other, essentially about business, music business 101. So I'll take a beat and I'll allow you to introduce yourself to the guest or to the class, and then we'll go from there.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Candace, Live Out Live, and Grammy, you for having me today. I appreciate it. Again, my name is LaDonna Williams, and I have so many titles, but we're going to focus today on artist management and entertainment brokering.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Yeah, you do wear a lot of hats. So it's going to be exciting to dive in and kind of peel some of those layers back and see what type of questions we can get from the young people here. So again, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to drop them out in the chat or raise your hand if something piques your interest and you want to know more about anything that LaDonna and I are touching on today. So we'll go right into a few questions. Can you share a bit about your journey within your journey that got you into your current role and what key experiences or decisions that helped shape this path into music management and music brokering?
Yeah, my path was unconventional. I started with wanting to be an artist myself, and I'm like, yeah, that's not me. And then I did promoters, and I was like, yeah, not enough money, too much energy. And through just introductions and meeting everyone, I actually landed in like the most awkward situation that worked out. So I was invited to a DJ Quick recording session, and he was doing a digital remastering for an album for his mom, and it didn't exist. So he's doing it by hand. He gets this error message that he can't quite get rid of. He's frustrated. He's like, I'm going to take a break, walks out the room. And the computer geek in me was like, I'm going to fix the error message. I probably shouldn't, but my intrusive thoughts won. So I fixed it. So when he came back, I'm like, hey, I fixed whatever was going on with your computer. And he was just like, you want to manage my band? And I'm like, I'm not qualified to manage a band. I don't know anything about that. So he's like, well, if you're good with people and you're willing to learn, like I'll teach you the technical stuff, but I can't teach you how to be a people person. So from there, I, did everything, the grunt work, the picking up food, the running to the studios, the everything to learn the ins and outs. And then along the way, I asked questions, I met people, I was just open to learning and doing my own research and stepping into that role full force, like with everything in me, and left corporate America and just kept going.
Wow, that's interesting. So you didn't see yourself as qualified, right? I know you probably, it wasn't your first rodeo. You probably had been around other artists and music business, endeavors around and about, but this was your first offer essentially as an entrepreneur into the music industry, allowing you to kind of be challenged and learn a little bit more about what you are capable of, right? Because you didn't feel like you were qualified, but overall qualifications kind of evolve over the course of time, right? Like as you're immersed into it. I think it's important that young people in here hear that, because they always want to hear, how do I get into, or what's the key to getting my foot into this space or that space? It's so non-conventional. It's so random sometimes, kind of how you mentioned. But I think the main point that you made was that you applied yourself, right? You knew that there was an action that needed to be taken, something that you could actually resolve or fix, and you stepped up and did that, and that kind of really showed who you were. That's incredible. I love to hear that story. So another question I have is, what are, you've worked extensively in artist development, as you mentioned, in management. And so what are some key qualities that you look for in an artist before deciding to work with them?
Ooh, that's a good one. I'd say the biggest thing is just having the right synergy between yourself and the talent, because this is a relationship. It's almost like a marriage with no benefits, right? This person's on your phone, they're texting, they're emailing, they're DMing, they're sending you invites, you're having this business conversation, but sometimes you even dive into their personal life a little bit, because it does affect their business too. And that could come down to, hey, I have to get paid under the table because child support's going to take my money. It could be, I have babysitting issues. It could be, I have alcoholism problems. It could be anything that comes into that. You are probably the one person in the whole situation knows more about him, sometimes than their families. And so you have that relationship with them, and you have to, of course, be able to provide that boundary, but this is someone that you're going to work with very, very closely. So there has to be a synergy. You have to be able to get along with them outside of just the business.
Wow. So you're saying to manage an artist's business, you have to be so connected with them that sometimes it crosses the line of some business and personal things, because they're living a real life. They're real humans. They're not just in business. They're navigating the creative space, the business space in partnership with you, but also their own real lives, right? So sometimes those challenges come into play.
Correct. Correct. And just understanding that helps shape how you represent them. And of course, there's a way to say it, right, to where you're not exposing things that you shouldn't, but it's still having an understanding of how they work, what their beliefs are, what their relationships are, any dynamics that might get in the way, or political things that are going on. You have to have a full understanding of who this person is so that you could do your job effectively.
That's interesting. So where do you draw the boundaries? How do you communicate those boundaries? Where do you draw the line on, okay, these aren't some of the things that I'm willing to do? Do you have those conversations up front? Are there things that kind of come up as you're working through your relationship with the artist or the talent? How does that conversation about boundaries, or how far you will or won't go as a manager, come up?
There are some things you can preempt, and then there are some things that are very situational and you may not have seen at all until they happen. So one conversation I have with artists before I make that decision is making sure that, one, they have something to manage, and two, understanding the difference between a manager and an agent and a financier and a psychologist and a babysitter, right? So just kind of understanding in that role, like I can manage you, yes, but this isn't coming out of my pocket. So what are your resources? And a lot of times, a lot of artists are like, wait, what? I thought as my manager, you're supposed, no. I'm supposed to essentially be a consultant for whatever it is that you want, and be able to connect those pieces together for you, or help you realize some idea that you have, and bring these connections and bring resources to you. But my primary role isn't an agent. There is an actual agent that you should have at some point in your career, because legally, my primary responsibility can't be to find you gigs.
Yeah, that's interesting. So you mentioned having something to manage, right? Let's go back to that part, because that's super important, because there's a lot of artists and talent in here, and there's a lot of artists and talent that these young people will eventually be collaborating with. What do you identify as having something to manage? How do you know if an artist have enough of a robust platform or IP for you to take on and drive it forward as a manager?
there's no real hard line. It really comes down to what you're willing to take on. You can start with an artist that's simply like, hey, I can sing, that's all I know. And I need you to help me get in the studio. I need you to help me get a producer. I need you to help me from beginning to end. And should you choose to accept, just know going into it, there's no equity. So just know you're coming into it as a passion project. And maybe one day it works out to something, but ultimately you have to make that decision stepping into the role, what you're willing to take on. And that speaks to the boundaries you're talking about. Like, where do we stand? And then protecting yourself too, as a manager. As much as you protect them, you have to protect yourself from them.
Yes. So my segue question into that is, as a woman in the music business, what unique challenges have you faced and how do you navigate them, right? You mentioned boundaries, you mentioned having to set clear, how do you navigate challenges that you face as a woman in the music business? And that could range.
Yes. I'll stick to two because there are many. But the ones that I come across the most is drawing the line between being a manager and being something more. So because you're very intertwined with their personal life, you're usually giving them guidance. As a woman, they come to you and they kind of accept you as a mothering role, and then that could lead into them wanting more. And you have to draw that line because it's already very intricate dance between being a manager and then just being in the same space. But now to intertwine something more becomes, a lot. It can easily spill into, them getting involved in your personal life or them wanting to know your kids or just other things that are just like, that's not why we're here. So that's probably the biggest one. The second biggest thing that I face is in certain roles, the unfortunate experience that I've had is that many times men assume as the woman, you're automatically the groupie or the girlfriend or the assistant. And so having representing a male artist, you have to have that talk with them that like, you need to not only respect me as a woman, but to have the people around you respect me too.
That is essential, right? Making sure, because people around an artist will respect the artist for sure. Because they see them at a higher standard, they hold them at a higher standard. But sometimes they don't know who you are, right? And they don't have that same regard for you. So I'm glad that that is a standard that you set as a business professional. Can you tell me more about your company? I know you are CEO and founder of your business. I would love to hear a little bit more about that, how that came about, and kind of all of the things that's what's all encompassing in your business and the services that you provide.
Sure. Similar to like my career, it pivoted. So the original reason why I started Stu's as a company is it was originally supposed to be a mobile app that I was in development. Unfortunately, that didn't work out well, but the brand was there, right? So it's like, well, let's put everything else I do into the brand. And so I then shifted a lot of my roles and responsibilities into the legal realm of now there's an LLC that represents what I do and gives me that layer of protection outside of just me being myself.
That's great. That's amazing. And thank you so much for starting your company. I'm sure that there's a lot of artists that benefit from your services and your talents. I know you and I have collaborated and worked together, and I've seen how amazing you are as a business professional. So I'm just glad that you are on your own path because it's not an easy thing to do in this industry. So very inspiring. Wanted to just take a beat real quick to see if there are any particular questions that you guys want to learn and hear from LaDonna. And if so, go ahead and raise your hand. Hey, Ron, let's hear from you.
Hello. Thank you
Hi.
so much, LaDonna, for taking the time to answer our questions and share your experience. And thanks to Candace for getting us all connected. So I had a question as far like, as an artist, when seeking out a talent manager, are there any red flags that we should be considering? One thing that I heard was a manager asking for a flat rate as opposed to a percentage. Would you say this is true in your experience?
That's something that I do with artists that I don't necessarily want to put the equity in upfront. right? So that takes it to like a money stance versus it just being a passion project. So if the manager is looking for more of like, hey, I need to diversify my income as well, then for beginning artists, that might be a format. And usually it's something that they feel could be affordable, but keeping in mind that they are a consultant. So wherever you are in your career, it could be 100% like, you don't have a sound yet. Let's sit down and let's create a sound so that you have something that's unique. Let's create these things that you need to be an artist. So it goes from management to really artist development in that space, because you're not quite where you could be. So now I have to sit side by side with you and make you the artist, versus finding somebody that's already quote unquote established. And then now you're like, okay, you have somewhat of a resume and I just need to polish it and put you in the right situations, versus I'm building an artist from scratch per se.
And when you say established, do you mean that they've identified their sound, they know they have music already produced, they already have videos? What level are you considered established as an artist for you to take on?
Royalty checks. Are you in a position to where you have royalty checks? Are you part of a union of some kind, whether that's a writers guild? Are you sat at AFM SAG-AFTRA? Like, where are you at in your career? And so that those kinds of accomplishments benchmark where you're at. Like, where do I fall into place? How much work is this going to take me to take you from where you're at to the next level?
Great. Ron, did that answer your question? Did you have any additional part twos to
Yeah.
that, or are you good?
No, I mean, that was pretty much my question as far as that specific comment that I heard. I wanted to see if the rumors were trumors from the expert herself. And then potentially any other sort of I guess as somebody who has never pursued seeking a manager, anything else that we should keep in mind when finding a qualified good manager?
Um, that's a very personal question, because you have to look into what and who you need to become the best artist you can be. Do you need someone who's a visionary with you? You could say like, hey, I want to put out a project and it needs to be pop, and I want to make people dance again, right? So do you want the manager to be able to take that idea and go create it, or do you just need someone that you can give paperwork to? Because that could be an assistant, that could be your friend, right? That did you guys learn together? So it depends on what you need as to who you need. Similar, and that's what I was saying, it's kind of like a marriage without the benefits, because it is a relationship and you have to find out who balances you. And then at the same time as, you know, the connotation is that's a manager, so you work for me. No, we work together, right? So there's times as a manager, I have to tell the artist like, hey, you need to pull it back a lot. You know, you're really riding the line, and this could potentially go to this direction, and that may not be healthy for you. So I advise against it. I'll support you, but I strongly advise against it, because this is the outcome that I see. And as the artist, is being able to take that feedback and not take it personal, and understand that you have that relationship where you know they're coming from their heart and they truly mean it. That's where that trust. So all those things are just very intricate in finding that right person.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think that taps on what you were saying earlier about um, seeing like what your specific needs are as far as choosing a manager. And then I have one more question that kind of ties into that. When should this is actually tied to what you were saying earlier about there's not a specific threshold for an artist to choose a manager, it's more what the artist wants to handle personally. But I was curious, when should an artist search for a manager specifically, as opposed to all of the kind of individual tasks like finding booking agent and, marketing agent and all of these specific things?
As far as well, I'll say this, as a manager, it's not to say you can't book of shows or gigs or whatever. You still have the ability to do so. It's just your primary role isn't finding gigs. Your primary role is being a consultant to help them in their career. Now, if your manager gets approached and say, hey, you know what, I really love Ron. I'd love to have them on my show. You know, what does it take? Yeah, I'm going to bring that into you. That's my job, right? But as an agent, the agent's job is 100% what's going on, what concerts are going on, how can I get them here? If you are into acting as well, the agent may even, you know, spend time in that realm, like, hey, you know, there's this like little indie film, or if you're into modeling, there's this fashion show, right? Their 100% job is money, right? Or putting you in a position to where you could eventually leverage it for money, versus a manager can even tell the agent like, I know it's money, but that's not a good look.
Totally. Thank you so much for clarifying that dynamic and answering those questions.
Thanks, Ron. Isabel, let's hear from you.
Hi, first of all, thank you so much for taking the time for giving us this awesome talk. Also, don't mind my voice. I'm a little bit like sick, so I'm coming out of a flu season, so I'm sorry for that. But I do have some questions. I really want to work on the management, like music industry part. I'm not an artist or anything, but I really love music. You know, like I always tell everyone, like I don't have the talent of singing or anything, but I really want to be in the management part. But my question is, how do I start putting myself out there? Like, I don't know, like it's not like I'm gonna be walking on the street anytime, like I'll be in a coffee shop and Justin Bieber will be like passing through me and I'll be like, okay, like give me a chance, you know, like, or he's gonna stop me and say, hey, do you want to be my manager or anything? So my question is pretty much like, how do I start putting myself out there? How do I get those connections? How do I get the experience? You know, you you said that you started, you know, you had no experience whatsoever and start getting. So how do you start like showing people that you have the knowledge? And I also see the market. Yeah, I see many artists that their parents or even family members start being their managers. So how do you break those how can I say, like walls, if I can say that, you know, like how can I tell them, hey, don't let your parents be your managers, let me be your manager? And how can I start, like, once again putting myself, you know, and get introduced to those artists, because I really want to work with this, but as I've mentioned, like it's not that easy to get contact with any of those artists like this easy, you know? So I just kind of want to know.
Definitely. So ideally, as a new manager, you'd want to come in and probably work with someone that might even just be your friend that knows how to sing or knows how to rap or whatever they do, or maybe they know how to play an instrument. Start with them because they're usually a lot more forgiving. And then learn together, right? But your job as a manager, you're always having to learn. You're staying on top of what's going on in the industry, what's successful by this person. Is it a new trend, or is it something that uniquely works for that person based on their brand? So you have to have a great understanding of branding, marketing, what type of talent you want to represent. If you go into like musicians and producers like I do, that's a whole different dynamic because the conversations are greatly different, right? And just understanding what contributions are. So a lot of the legal stuff you'll definitely have to study on, because as a manager, you are essentially an attorney in fact, right? Because you can represent them legally. And if you have your paperwork in order, then you can sign on their behalf and they're legally bound to whatever you sign. So you have to have an understanding of how to have those conversations on their behalf as well. But if you start with someone like that's your friend, then it's like, hey, let's sit down together and let's talk through it together. And then through that, you kind of get your legs wet, just like if you would any other job, right? And then just study, just always be open to learn everything from everyone.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate.
Very sound advice. I think that working with your peers is the best way to create a succession plan together and for you to grow and to learn. So very sound advice, LaDonna. Thank you for sharing that. And she did mention understanding the legalities around it. We were fortunate to have Channing B join us last Wednesday for our music business 101 session. And she talked a lot about the legalities around the music business. And so definitely reference that. You can go back to YouTube and check out the recording of that and tap back in and learn a little bit more from Channing B from last week. But next question we have from James. Hi, James. Good to see you again.
Hi, good. Thanks for coming on with us again, and thank you to LaDonna for joining us this week. I mean, I think how you laid out what management is as a team effort is so important, and how it's not necessarily all encompassing. That it's really a partnership, and definitely a lot of young artists think that they don't have to do work to and the success in the business is all about the work of the artist more than anybody else. But I wonder, and I want to say one more thing. I appreciate the fact that you also, in your own scope of your defining yourself as a manager, that you're interested in managing producers, because I'm a producer, and it's something I've considered in my long 30-year career of whether and or not to have a manager. And I feel pretty lucky that I could have used a manager, but I've made decisions about really not actively seeking that because of the consistency of how I produce, and one of the things you spoke about is like, what are you bringing in? That, what my 20% or 25, I don't know what your agreements are, but I usually expect from managers are between 15 and 25%, for the work that they do and whatever's associated with that contract. I digress. One thing that I always sort of advise artists or people who are seeking managers on is sometimes it's good to do a trial period. Do you ever consider doing like, let's see what we do for 6 months to a year before we, go into a longer relationship, so we know if we really understand what we want each other? Do you ever have instances where you do that with artists or producers? And what do you think about that?
Yes, I am a fan of the trial period, especially if you've never worked with someone in that dynamic at all. Or if it's a blind contact where it's like, hey, I first refer to your friend, you don't know them at all, or you don't know them very well. But I give them 90 days. I
Okay.
think in 90 days, you get a sense of who someone is. It's very hard to hide who you truly are for longer than 90 days, right? There's the mask, right? I'm this great person, I make this great music, but within that 90 days, you start kind of seeing their mannerisms, like what their principles are, what their morals are, and then you can, with experience, right, you'll start to know like, hey, this is a huge red flag, and if this has happened in 90 days, 6 months, a year, it could be so involved that you are in the middle of a commitment that you can't get out of. Because depending on how you write that contract or what you guys agree on, you could still be stuck with them for an additional year after your contract terminates, because you have to fulfill commitments that you made during the agreement. And if you structure it right, you should still be reaping benefits, right? But with that still comes a responsibility to that person or that brand. So I usually give 90 days. Within that time frame, a lot of it's fact finding. Where are you at? Where are you at with your business? If you're a producer, okay, let's just start with, are your files organized? If I had somebody
That's a great question.
I need to, I need a pop song for this, licensing sync placement. It needs to feel like the person, lost. And then there's like a champion thing, right? And it's usually super vague. And I should be able to say, hey, James, I need something pop and I need champion music. And that's all I know. And then you should be able to say, here's a folder within 24 hours of anywhere between 6 to 15 different songs that I could shop, right? But if your files aren't organized and you got, step out 1, step out 1A, step out 1 repass, step out, you know what I mean? Like all of those things. And it's just like, okay, but which version, where are we at? Like this, you're going to miss the opportunity by the time you go back and try to fix everything. So I say that to say a lot of that 90 days is let's just get you organized first and let's figure out where you are so that I understand fully what my responsibilities are to you based on what you actually need against what you thought you needed.
Great. Thank you so much. And I'll just follow up with one other thing. And you were kind in the way you said it, but I once had a meeting when I was managing an artist with a pretty significant music manager, and I took him to a professional basketball game for our meeting, which helped me get the meeting. And this manager had managed at that time Destiny's Child, some really significant artists, and he wanted to go to the game. But before the game had just started, and he's like, "Look, James, I think I know what you want, but my question is to you is my 20% gonna make me $20,000 every time we do something? And if your answer to that is no, then you're not ready for me, you know?" And I mean, and I don't feel like that was rude. It was a great education for me and understanding who I was sitting down with from the beginning, and I think that is just real as far as, like him assessing the artist I was bringing to the table, who's great, who I believe in, but I know that our deals weren't going to cut him those kind of checks. And at the time, I also didn't understand that we really did need a booking agent, not just management, which is two different things, although they can function together. So, would you ever do that kind of approach? Do you know your number? Or do you make your decisions based on different metrics on how you take on clients?
With any business agreement, right, you have to understand the investment and the return on your investment. And so without speaking to like his personal style, right, I'm going to safely assume he knows what he can accomplish. He's proven what he can accomplish. So he may not have felt at that time that you're already in a space where he can take you on because he felt that he would still have to build you. And the investment it might take him the whole 2 years or whatever your agreement is just to get you to the point where he could actually start making money. Right. And that could be phone calls, text messages, emails, everything all day long, and he's not getting the return. So, but that speaks to, like you said, just putting a value on your time. Same thing that it would for an artist. You know what you would like to make, but it's also like, are you able to bring that in, right? So most promoters will ask, well, are you going to sell tickets? Right. So if I book you for this event, are you going to bring in 10 heads? Are you going to bring in 25 heads? Like, where am I getting the return? Is this a political decision? If I book you, do I also get the other person that I really wanted? Like, so it's always a conversation. And I think that's the biggest thing in any agreement is it's really just a conversation in all these legal words. This is the conversation we had, and we're agreeing to whatever's on this document, and you sign it.
Thank you so much, LaDonna.
Definitely.
Great questions. Thank you. We have a couple of questions in the chat, and I will address those and we'll get right back to you, Ron. Question from Kiara Marie. How do you keep up with industry trends and development for your clientele? Like, how do you recommend what works with a brand and vision, but keeps them up to date?
Social media. I'm on social media periodically through the day. I'm reading articles. I'm watching YouTube shorts. I'm doing it all, right? I don't post on my social media. I'm terrible at it, I'll admit. But I'm still combing through and seeing and studying what's been successful. So you have, we were talking about what's best for that brand. So if you look at La Russell, he's the caveat to most people's branding, right? He's like, look, I'm literally going to walk down the street with my iPhone on my afternoon walk. And that's the content you're getting. I'm doing concerts in my backyard, and that's the content that you're getting. And so for him, that works because that's his branding. Whereas if you look at Adochi, she's like, I'm going to come with the most fashion forward, eccentric outfits. And I'm just going to be so in your face that you have no choice but to see me or hear me. And that's different for every artist. So you are looking to see what's been successful, but you also want to intertwine what's been successful, and then maybe there's a piece here and a piece here and a piece here that you've seen, or a different spin on it that might work for this specific client. Or maybe we could do it this way, but instead of doing a big concert, maybe we just need to do a small concert with 150 great people in the audience that are super content heavy. Like, what is the goal? And then from there, you work your way backward.
That's a good piece of advice. When you brought up the point of authenticity, right? Like, it's good to scan to see what's trending and seeing what's cool, but branding is very personal to your own business and creative craft. So it's very important to make sure that you are plugging in that authenticity, because that's what really is going to allow you to leverage and stand out. So it's really good that you're following trends and looking around to see what's popping on social media, but also really honing in on what's authentic to your specific artist. We have another question from Kiara Marie. Do you find it easier to manage artists from one music genre over the others? I know you manage producers mostly, but would you be able to answer that question?
I have a gospel band that I manage. That's new. I haven't managed some gospel, but they're still a band and they're still musicians. So when I was speaking earlier about continuous learning, I know music and I know management, but I don't know every specific church brand, right? So I have to learn more about, like, what does this religion believe in? You know, can we do this? Can we wear this? Like, how do we behave when we go in these spaces? So, you know, I'm constantly learning when it comes to that realm. And then I have, you know, hip hop artists that I represent, and I know what comes with that, right? And then I just kind of like mold myself into that dynamic. But to answer your question, not necessarily. I think that different genres require a different hat. So I haven't worked in the rock space yet, but it's still music, right? And there's just nuances that you learn in any environment, and you just are open and willing to learn it. Or you decide, like, hey, I'm not comfortable.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Just to mix it up a little bit, and add some fun, can you speak to a time, without revealing any names, when you had to creatively navigate a difficult negotiation partnership?
Ooh. Mm. I'll speak to an experience that one artist had, right? So I had this one artist that I managed, and they were chronically late to everything, like their own show. And I get there early. I'm there for sound check. I'm meeting with the stage techs. I'm making sure everybody's checked in. The band's here. Everybody's good. The artist is nowhere to be found. Call the artist, where are you at? Oh, I'm at the hotel down the street and I'm getting my hair rebraided because I messed up one of my braids and I can't possibly go on stage like this. So I had my hairstylist, who's in LA, drive down to San Diego so that they could fix this one braid. But then I realized I should just redo it all over. And I'm like, you're supposed to be here in 30 minutes. Yeah, I know, but I don't want to go looking like this. Great. So I'm in everyone's face. Where is he at? Where is he at? Where is he at? Well, you know, blah, 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 and, you know, traffic and everything else. And I blamed it on everything I could. And eventually it's stage time. And they're like, where is he at? Oh, he had to go back home to LA because he forgot XYZ. And so he had to go back to the valley and he got caught in traffic on the way back down. So he should be here any minute now, right? It wasn't true, right? They're still down the street. But what bought me time in thinking on my feet was, there happened to be that day, there was a huge fire along the 5 freeway that shut down part of the 5 in that area. And so they were like stuck on the other side of this fire. But the legal part saved me, right? So you have a clause called force majeure, which is basically things that are outside of your control. So I had to use the fire to buy us another 30 minutes of time for him to feel like coming. And in the meantime, the show's still going on. The show's still going on. Where is he at? Where is he at? So I'm like, well, you're just going to have to restructure your show. I don't know what else to tell you. So they finally come and they're like, I'm supposed to be on stage at this time. And I'm like, you were supposed to be here 2 hours ago. Yeah, but I was drinking and smoking and then my hair and we got cool and comfortable and I had to change, every excuse. And so I'm like, okay, well, you go on last. Well, then that means I have to cut my performance time down from 45 minutes to like 25 minutes. Not my problem. This is where it's at, because there's noise ordinance and they have to shut everything down at 11 and it's 10:25 and there's still an act on stage. So you want me to tell them you're here?
Sounds a lot of my about a lot of matters that happen in my industry. 'Cause I work in the live music business, right? And you want things to go off without a hitch, but it's never the case, right? As long as the fans don't see the chaos, which
Right.
there's always chaos, then you did a great job, you know?
Yeah.
So in order to navigate and broker deals in the music industry, like what are some of the skills that you have to have? I know you said they organically came about because you learned as you went and grew and developed from that. But what are some of the concrete skills that you always had that you developed over the course of time, and skill set that you've lean on heavily? Like, these are the most important tools in my toolbox.
The biggest one is just I'm a solutionist. So if you're just like, hey, LaDonna, I have a problem. If I don't know, I'm going to figure it out. I need someone to do like one deal I brokered with Sony. It was Sony 360 Reality Audio in partnership with Imagination is Everything, which is Pharrell's company. And it's like mixing audio in literally 360 degrees. So you're hearing music from under your feet as well as behind your head. Totally dope. So somebody hits me up and says, hey, I need some producers to do this. This is a really cool project. Let me send you a little sizzle. So I look at it and I'm like, oh, I know the perfect people. Let me make some calls. So naturally, right, when you talk about like engineers and producers, I was like, hey, quick, I have this really cool project. You should do it. And he's like, okay, cool. So we get down to the details and we talk about it, availability, blah, blah, blah. But, it's understanding too what that really means. So when we were going to do the video was going to go on a website. So now we're talking about multiple different types of law. So, okay, so it has to be a song that we completely own, because if it still belongs to Sony, which you had to deal with Sony at one point, then we have to get a license from Sony as well as have you sign off. And I don't know if they have the budget to do that, because who knows what Sony is going to want. So let's pick songs that you 100% own. And then also let's pick the song that is, most favorable to what you want to do in your career right now, right? So you definitely don't want to do one that speaks ill of anybody. So no, we can't do dollars and cents. We can't, you know what I mean? So let's pick songs that we know. And then once we got that part done, then it's like, okay, great. I've massaged as much as I can. Let's send it to the lawyer. Let him just do a final once over. And then other than that, we had a great time. And then they're like, oh, that was so cool. I'd always love blah, blah, blah. Do you have anybody else? And then you meet people along the way, and working in a management capacity, because you've signed deals, you've had to speak to managers, you've had to meet artists, you're in these spaces. So it's always keeping good relationships so that if anything does come up that fits that person, then you could always just be like, hey, I have this situation. Did you want me to hand it over to your manager? Do you want me to handle it? And they say, oh, no, you already got it. Okay, cool. Well, I'm going to send you an agreement that gives me my piece, right? Because I'm still working. And then that way I can negotiate this on your behalf and we could both get paid. So always thinking of solutions.
Yeah. Which is key in life, being solution oriented, being results driven, making sure that you are doing your best to accomplish your goals successfully, is definitely key. Ron, do you want to come on and ask your question?
Oh yeah, sure. I put it in the comments. But I was just wondering if you could delve further into the formal process for solidifying an agreement between the manager and the artist. And I was wondering if that kind of formal agreement is expected between the two when first meeting or during that trial period you had mentioned.
I always use the conversation first. And then after we have the conversation, then I go back and I draft the agreement. And it's never a, here's the agreement, and then that's it, that's all. It's still a conversation because they may not like how a certain paragraph is worded, or I may not agree with the payment schedule. And so it's a conversation, whether it's virtually, right, or it's on the phone or text message, whatever it is, until you find a space where you're both comfortable. So one thing I always put, especially when dealing with, artists of any kind or producers, right, is I always put a conflict of interest clause in there that basically says, I'm going to represent your competition. And I'm just letting you know now, like, this is not negotiable. So just letting you know ahead of time that I'm going to represent other producers. I'm going to represent other artists that are going to be your competition. And if you don't fit the bill, you don't fit the bill, right? Where it talked about payment schedule and whatever that commission is that we agree on. And then what specifically is a commissionable item, right? So are you going to start a brand, or do you have a potential to start a brand? You always want to think about not just where you're at now, but where is the potential going? So another thing I'll put in there is, I manage you, but if you become you as 1/5 of a group, I still manage you as an individual and then you as part of this group, even if you have a new moniker. And then if you decide you want to change your moniker, I manage that one too. And then if you go and you establish a publishing company, I manage that too, because I manage you and everything that has to do with you, because I help build you to the point where you could make these new branches off of your tree. So unless we agree otherwise, everything you touch, I manage, because it all feeds back into this career. Everything is intricately assisting one or another. So it's hard to say I represent you as an artist, but then I don't represent your brand, because your brand is still part of who you are. And then, that feeds in, oh, well, I want to wear my shirt everywhere I go. You should. But if someone asks me about your brand being in a fashion show and I don't have permission to do that, then who's going to do it? Oh, you want me? Okay, so that's that. And then you don't want to have 55 revisions of the contract. So you always preempt the now and the later in it too. So likeness and image, if you are into modeling and acting, just having certain things in there, like I was saying earlier, to protect you from the artist and to protect the artist too.
That makes a lot of sense. So essentially, the contract agreement with that individual artist, you wouldn't be having separate agreements for their band and for them.
You shouldn't. It gets too crazy.
Sure.
You end up with exhibit A, exhibit B, schedule A, schedule B, and then it ends up being this big by the time you get done, right?
Yeah.
You
No,
know,
that totally makes sense.
right.
There's definitely language to incorporate all encompassing information, right? So yeah, at all, at all, like all of it. Yeah, like including all of the streams and drivers that are affiliated with the artist, so, or producer or whoever you're managing. So very great feedback, LaDonna. Thank you so much for sharing that. And Ron, thank you so much for the question.
Totally.
Kiara Marie, let's hear from you.
Hello. My question was also in the chat. I have so many since you just talked now, but I'm gonna try to keep it short since we don't have a lot of time. So my first question was relating back to your incident with the artist being late.
Mhm.
If this was like continuous like behavior, would that be considered as a breach of contract? Because there's only so much you can do and like cover for them before it starts kind of ruining your own reputation. So there,
Um,
yeah, that's my first one.
you can always put like a good faith clause in there. Just say that, that person's gonna do everything within their power to, do whatever that you guys agree on, right? But it's tricky because if you know that that's who your artist is and you still choose to represent them, then you know what it comes with, right? So
Mm,
little tricks. Yeah, sound checks at 3 and it's at 4. Or, like, hey, I sent you the flight, we need to get there, we need to arrive at such time. So you start doing little things like that, because the hard part about it, the truth about it is most creatives aren't regimented, right? They're
mm.
very like, I was in the vibe, I was feeling good, or, I didn't want to break the mood, or I was in a good little jam session. And if I left, like I would have lost my thought, or I would have lost that melody. So that just kind of comes with the nature of it. So if you're too much of like a stickler, then you kind of make that an abrasive relationship, because you don't want to be a dictator. You don't want to feel like you're an authority to them at all. This is a partnership. So if that means
Okay.
that you need to give them a little wiggle room, knowing that that's who they are, then you just know who that's are, and you preface as much as you can in the most professional way that you can.
Okay, thank you. My last one is very simple. So with that being the case, how long do you recommend like for a contract renewal? Because like some companies do like 7 years with their artists. Like for managers, what is that time length before we start reviewing?
Yeah, within the term, in the contract, you'll have a paragraph called term and terminations. So after the trial period, let's say we do the 90 days first and we agree like this is a good fit, then you can
Okay.
your term be a year. So every year it
Okay.
renews unless we agree otherwise. And then
Okay.
provide so many days notice. This is what happens when our relationship dissolves. What
Mhm.
happens to the projects I started? What happens to what we were already working on? Do I still get paid
Mm.
out for those things? How do we terminate? Does it have to be in writing? All those things go into that negotiation on how to sever ties.
But it's usually a year. Like that's the norm, or is it just depending on the artist that you're talking to?
1 to 2 years is an industry
Okay.
norm, because
Okay.
a lot changes in 2 years.
That would make sense. Okay. Thank you so much for answering my questions.
You're welcome.
Yeah, that's a good one. And to your point, 1 to 2 years is just enough, because after those 2 years, you very well may not want to be in business with that artist, right? So it gives you guys both an opportunity to revisit that conversation. We'll do one last question, which I think I just popped up in the chat, and then we'll wrap up. So once the artist is established and you create an agreement with them, what type of royalties would the manager most likely be entitled? Should they choose the agreement based on profit splits instead of flat rates?
Hmm. I don't necessarily say royalties, because that limits you as a manager. So I usually say net profit or gross profit, depending on my relationship with them. And then because you have to consider everything, right? Everything that went into creating the money, just like any other business. So usually, as James was saying earlier, like an industry standard is anywhere between 15 to 25%, depending on whatever your agreement is. So it would be, 15 to 25%, whatever, of net profit or gross profit. And then that way you're not specifically tying to royalties, because it's a lot harder to generate royalties right now with everything being streams and digital. So you could work for 2 years and get $100 because they're, putting out their music on DistroKid. Not to down talk it, but let's just, be real. There's not a lot of money in streaming at all. So the majority of the money that the artists are making, or the producers or musicians are making, is in the upfront money. So artists, when you go to shows, if you're booking a show for $25,000, I want my piece of that $25,000, because even if I didn't negotiate it and the agent did it, I still have to be there to make sure you actually do what you agreed to do. I still have to play a part in that. So it's usually gross or net profits versus just royalties.
Yeah, I agree. I appreciate net profits, because that goes to show that's the money that's going into their bank account that you deserve your piece of. So for sure that, and like you said, streaming is hard to track. So it's best to have other verbiage to kind of protect you in that respect. So I think your follow-up was, so labels ask for 360 deals are detriment to managers who are receiving net profit share.
Well, I look at it like this, all label deals are 360. They all still want their money back. The question becomes, are they willing to release you when they get their money back? So when you think about label deals, it's really just an overly complicated bank loan. That's it. It's like any other investment, right? So they want their money back with interest, and sometimes that interest is 100% equity, and they'll continue to get their 20% or whatever it is forever until you say stop. And then even when you do, and you're like, I want to own my masters, I want all my content back, then they do an evaluation to determine what is the projected revenue that we could potentially make off of this album or this artist. And then we're going to put even more on top of that for you to buy all your rights back. So you really don't get much money off of it anyway, but it's hard. Right now the dynamic is everyone wants to be signed to a label because it looks great on paper, but if you don't have a team and you get that advance, that 100,000, that 1 million, whatever that advance is, you're gonna waste it. And then you're not going to be able to produce a project that even earns a fraction of that money back. And you're going to forever owe them and have to claim potentially bankruptcy on a record deal. And then you end up in situations similar like TLC. They never recouped and they went bankrupt. And so all the waterfalls and all that we saw, they were 100% living check to check, just like everybody else. Because they charge their rates. Yeah, you're going to Paramount Recording Studios, it looks great on the gram, but they're charging you normal market rates for that studio in your agreement, and they're adding that on to whatever your advance was. And then you're a girl, so now they want to have their makeup artists come, and your hair and your nails and all these things, and it's just all tacking onto your bill in addition to your advance. The coaches, the everywhere, and I'm doing this for the label. No, they're billing you for it. So they're not doing you any favor other than just going to the bank and getting your own loan yourself.
Amazing. That's amazing information to end on. You guys see how important it is to understand the business behind the music industry. It's 100% amazing to be an artist, but you have to understand this is the music business, and you have to understand your own business. Even if you have a team of people, you have to be able to ask them intelligent questions so that you can gain more understanding and insight into how your business is being ran in this music industry. So glad that you can join us, LaDonna. Thank you so much for your time today and such key gems that you shared. I know I learned a lot, so I hope that everyone else here learned a lot. One last thing, would you mind just telling them where they can find you on LinkedIn, on socials? How can they keep up with you and potentially gain mentorship and support from you?
Sure. I'm terrible at keeping my LinkedIn up to date. But my Instagram is LVDONNV. So I'll put it in the chat. But it's LaDonna with V's instead of A's. So that's probably the easiest place to see anything current.
Perfect. Thank you so much, guys. Thanks for allowing us to crash your industry sessions again, Skylar.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, LaDonna. Thanks for the great questions. And James, thank you always for instruction. And again, thank you all for being flexible with our technical difficulties. So hope you all enjoyed your week. And LaDonna, thank you so much again. Hope to everybody is following, and reach out if you have questions. And Candace, we'll see you tomorrow.
Yeah.
We'll see you tomorrow. Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Hey, James.